So, welcome everyone. It is Rosie and Matthew coming straight to you from our DreamArc headquarters in New Mexico and British Columbia. And we are here to dive deep into this month's DreamArc theme, from cubs to lions, how our children and relationship to animals impact our emotional intelligence and resilience. So, this is part of our new experiment where we're striving to meet the various needs and wishes of our community of DreamArc enthusiasts. We aim to give our DreamArc participants some extra food for contemplation, as well as some extra time to warm up to this month's theme before our upcoming DreamPod call. We're also making sure that those of you who do come to our next call get a nice, luxurious amount of time to connect with each other and share stories, because Matthew and I will have done most of our talking now. And for those of you Gene Keys lovers who are simultaneously journeying through the Venus sequence, we'll be doing some Venusian and DreamArc theme weaving to connect and enhance your experience. But don't worry if you don't know what the Venus sequence is, or you're not in that program. It's not required to enjoy this transmission, just as watching this transmission is not required to participate and enjoy in the upcoming call. So let's start by inviting all of you to share in the comments where you are in the world. We would just love to know. I'm in Santa Fe. Matthew, you are where in British Columbia?
Lake Cowichan, Vancouver Island.
Oh,
Columbia.
one of the most beautiful places on the planet.
Thank
And
you.
please also feel free to share what your relationship is to the DreamArc. Are you an old timer, totally new, somewhere in between? And we just want to welcome you all. So very soon I'm going to hand the baton over to Matthew, who's going to bring us together energetically through an attunement. And then after that, we're going to each share our thoughts about this month's theme. We're going to share contemplative questions as we go. And we're going to make sure you get the essence of the questions in written form. So don't worry if you can't remember them all. And remember, only a small portion of them will be meant for you. And we're also going to be offering some of our own personal shares. We'll be inviting you to percolate on the themes along with us over the coming weeks. And we'll likely sprinkle in some wisdom as we go from some animals in the DreamArc, from the Codex written by Richard. And at the end, I'll share a few central questions that we're going to be inviting people to explore together when the DreamPod call happens in a couple of weeks. And then a beautiful, inspiring video narrated and
Absolutely. Thank you, Rosie, for that introduction. Let's join in a bit of an attunement here. So, if you're listening to this and you're driving, please don't close your eyes. But if you are in a place where you can close your eyes, we encourage you to close your eyes and make yourself comfortable. Come on this journey with us. Give yourself some time, give yourself some space. Give yourself a cup of tea or something to just bring you into this space of reflection together. So I encourage you just right now, if you can, to close your eyes and make yourself comfortable, to bring your attention inward, to bring your attention to your breath, to bring your attention to your being, to notice what's taking place inside of your being at this time. Where are you noticing yourself, your attention being drawn to in your body at this time? Each breath, just taking yourself a little bit deeper into relaxation so that you can really listen to that still, quiet inner voice. And as you become more relaxed, I just want you to gradually form an image in your mind of yourself standing at the edge of a lake. You're standing with your feet rooted on the shoreline, perhaps on the grass, perhaps it's a pebbly beach. But you're looking out across this lake, this vast lake. As we do so, we're allowing our intuition and imagination to guide this little journey, this little attunement. And as you look upon the lake, What do you notice about the surface of the water of this lake? Is it a calm, still surface? There may be a few waves. Is it a windy day? Is it a calm day? What are you noticing? This lake, in some ways, becomes symbolic of our emotional life. And so we can test the waters, we can sense the nature of the waters in this moment and reflect on them as we begin to tap into our own emotional waters of the EQ sphere, which you might know your gene keys and line number, but even if you're not working with that, you don't need to know that. You just need to come into your own relationship with your emotions at this time. And as you stand here at the lake, you notice a young figure coming up towards you and standing beside you. You might just recognize this as a younger version of yourself, somewhere between the age of 8 and 14. Just allow your intuition to form that in your mind, your imagination, your intuition, connecting you with this version of yourself, trusting where you're landing, trusting in that inner guidance of yours to know exactly what you need at this moment. So when we enter into these emotional waters, we're entering into a realm that is beyond the mind in many ways. And it's just about allowing ourselves to experience, to feel. And as you stand in next to your younger self, you might look at yourself. You might notice how your younger self is holding itself up. What do you notice about your younger self, about your energies, about your maybe your emotions? Did you wear your emotions on your sleeves, or did you tuck those emotions away for nobody but you to be familiar with? And perhaps even then you were numb to your own emotions. Or perhaps you see playful, joyful child. There is no right or wrong in this. This is about you connecting with this younger version of yourself, calling it forth into this moment here. Whatever your relationship with your younger self at this moment, trusting that it's bringing forth something to your awareness. What is your relationship? How is your younger self responding to you? Open and receptive, or maybe a little withdrawn, maybe avoiding eye contact, or open armed? Again, which is it for you? And so, as we come into relationship to our younger self, as we come in relationship to these emotional waters around us, at this lake, I also invite you to become aware if any other people draw close. And these can be people from your past, they could be people from your present, but people that maybe are here working with you and either triggering some of these emotional responses or guiding how you respond, or that's something in this. Again, trusting your intuition as your guide. Allowing those people to, maybe it's just an image of them and maybe they pass in and out. Maybe it's a lot of people, maybe it's just one or two people. As we go through the call today, it might be clearer why this person has stepped forward. And now you might have had pets, might have been close to certain animals at this time of your life. Did you have a cat, a dog, maybe a budgerigar, maybe some other creature that was close to you, that was around the home, that played a part in these years of your life? Maybe that creature is stepping forward now, and maybe Maybe it's triggering some remembrance for you. Perhaps you're experiencing a remembrance of the unconditional love that this animal brought into your life. Perhaps you're experiencing other memories of your time with this animal, but specifically the animals you knew at that time of your life. And if there were no animals, perhaps there were no pets of your own. Maybe it was animals from other families or communities that you visited. And so we stand here at the side of the lake, stand here at this beach with our younger self and with some of these companions that have stepped forward. And in this moment, it might not be clear. You might not know why certain people have come forward or certain beings have come forward, and just allow them to be here. Allow this to be a way in which you enter into the mystery, to the trust, a deeper trust of self and of your own inner authority. And so you may commune for just a moment or two longer with your younger self, with the animals, with the other human visitors. You might even have had beings from other dimensions that you communicated with at that time as well. Just allow ourselves this communion for a moment or two. And then gradually these images begin to fade away, and you see yourself standing at the water's edge once more, looking across this vast lake, noticing again the surface of the lake and the wind in the air. Just anything that you're being drawn to in your mind's eye at this time. And then gradually this too, the vision of the lake fades away. All of this is here with you as you enter into this contemplative space together today. But for now, it retreats from the mind's eye. You find yourself sitting once more or lying down wherever you are at this time, aware of the ground beneath your feet, aware of the sky over your head, and aware of the directions before you to the north, the east, the south, the west. Breathing, being aware of yourself in this time, in this space, and just giving yourself a moment or two to feel rooted, grounded. And when you're ready and in your own time, you can open your eyes and we can continue this journey from cubs to lions. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. That was really profound. I won't get into the details, but I really felt like I connected to a loss of innocence moment.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Um, Interesting. So, and then the person who came to me was my grandma on my father's side, who I haven't really connected with in many years. You know, she's been passed for a long time, and I really feel her connection to that child that I was before everything changed. So, thank you for that. I'm going to be percolating on I'm going to be percolating on that for a while. And I hope other people had a beautiful experience. And I'm just so grateful to you for bringing us together and planting such rich and fertile seeds for our exploration. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, even if nothing
Yeah.
lands in this moment, yeah, like you take
It
it as,
comes.
yeah, something. Yeah.
And we're going to build on each other today, you know, Matthew and me, and we're going to ask you questions, and together we're going to like stir the cauldron, and something will emerge. And luckily we've got plenty of time. We have our whole lives. So, as you can feel, this gathering is dedicated to the exploration of the emotional journey, and the emotional journey of us human beings in general, right? With all of its splendor, its pleasure, its pain, its passion, its turbulence, its longing, its despair, its ugliness and destructiveness, its loss of innocence, and its beauty, and we're going to be looking at it in a very dreamarchy way. Now, as some of you may know, during our last sharing, we focused on the teenage mind, those very magical and vulnerable, fiery and fantasy rich years between 14 and 21. And a little bit before, I included a little bit of teenager years in there. But this time we're going to be going further back in time, as Matthew said, to those tender, innocent, and totally transformative ages between 8 and 14. Now, according to the gene keys, the Venus sequence, and many people in the field of childhood development, these are years that play an absolutely fundamental role in shaping our emotional intelligence, as well as our capacity to imagine, to play, to trust in our intuition as we grow into adulthood. And it's really during these middle years, like this cycle of puberty, you could call it, or this huge transition, this passage of no return, that we move away from an original experience of total dependency, of oneness, even paradise for some, not everyone, towards greater independence, towards greater self-awareness and cognitive expansion. So this is when we cultivate a sense of I and the experience of being a separate, autonomous individual. So the conditioning environment that we have during these years, whether it's loving, abusive, or neglectful, whether it's too strict, too loose, or just right, which reminds me of Goldilocks, ultimately determines how well we learn to listen, how to attune to others with empathy and genuine curiosity, how well we learn to communicate clearly and to form friendships and to experience kindness, and how we naturally or not naturally tend towards inclusiveness. It's also the time when we have the potential to learn how to healthfully regulate our feelings and nervous systems and to take responsibility for our own emotional life, which means that we have the potential to come to know at a very deep level that our feelings are valid and to trust that there are safe spaces where we can feel and express those feelings freely without causing ourselves or other people harm. Now, this is also a time in our young lives where we can learn how to hold and navigate our own healthy boundaries. And already now, I invite you, and you too, Matthew, to think back to that time in your life. You might think of it in stages, like I did when I had that experience during your attunement, Matthew, because our 8-year-old self is likely quite different than the 11-year-old self and the 14-year-old self, right? So my question is, or invitation now, is like, if you could come up with one or two adjectives to describe yourself at that age, or maybe at a few stages within that range, what adjectives would you choose, right? Like it might be, happy, creative, a dreamer, rebellious, envious, invisible, compliant, wild, a mediator, highly sensitive, those kind of things. So if you're watching now, feel free to share your adjectives in the comments below, or maybe just jot them down for yourself in a journal or on a napkin if you're in a cafe. And I'd also be curious to know if you have any adjectives to describe the environment that you grew up inside of during that time in your life, right? Or it could be the main people, the parents, the caregivers, the teachers who influence that environment. So what would those adjectives be? Like it could be peaceful and playful, or frightening and conflictual, or loving and warm, or strict and oppressive. I'm just giving you ideas. Communicative and communal, chaotic and boundaryless, safe and supportive, resentment filled and blaming, overly expressive, totally repressed. So these are just some possibilities. So just put them in there, just write them out, start thinking about it. And while you do that, I'm wondering, Matthew, if you wanted to share any of the adjectives that came to you or anything that stood out for you, either about, that age or the environment you grew up in, or maybe just a few words about how much you or your environment changed during that phase of your growing up. And I'll ask you more questions later on, but just a couple of words for us to warm us up.
I think where you said between the age of 8 and 14, that was like, yeah, it shifted because curious, playful, even mischievous, like
Ah,
at 8 years old, right? There is a little bit of that going on for sure. Very curious about the world and my relation to it. Playful, yeah. I had lots of friendships, so it was like very outgoing and then later on, I did notice you sort of moving into, I went to a different town in that time. And moving to a different town, it was a different environment. And suddenly I was bullied in a different environment where once before I'd been kind of like initially I was, people weren't welcoming necessarily to this southerner from England. So and it was a Catholic school, so strict. When you said that word about strict, and it was like, it was, it was there was always that threat of some kind of punishment hanging over if you did the wrong thing or said the wrong thing. And in contrast to that, having quite a loving home environment,
mm,
so I could see that. And, as I've reflected on this time, my 8 to 14 were very different. Those were my easier years. There was the confusion of going through puberty in a world where it wasn't necessarily talked about what was happening inside of me. So yeah, definitely worth like looking because when I first thought about this question, I was looking more at the 8 to 12, and then it's like, yeah, there is a shift that goes on there. And somebody else was talking about this the other day. It's also a time when some of those myths that we'd grown up with, like Father Christmas and the Tooth Fairy and things like that. Maybe I shouldn't say this in case this isn't everybody, but that was a time when I realized that that was a story that I had been told. I hope I haven't destroyed anybody's childhood saying that, or adulthood rather. Yeah.
oh my God, that's so funny, Matthew. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I like too that you kind of point out that sometimes we're living in contrasting environments during our childhood or different times. Like at school, it was strict and oppressive, maybe religiously oriented, home, warm and loving, right? So it's both, we can have different environments that are happening simultaneously, and then we can have the changing environments as we move through different stages of our lives. So thank you for that. I'm sure that got people's juices going. And I'll just keep going with this little dreamarchy look at the metaphor that we chose for the title of the conversation, which is From Cubs to Lions. And you might be wondering, what does the journey of a little lion cub have to do with me? Well, you might be surprised at the parallels. Very much like a human child, a cub begins its life small and vulnerable and dependent. And just like we learn from the guidance that we receive from our parents, education, and life experiences, a cub learns, right? They might learn to hunt or defend themselves and to find their place in the pride. So a cub doesn't have any sense of the strength it's one day going to have and embody, just like we have no idea what our true potential is until we mature and we step into our own authority. Cubs have to face all kinds of challenges as they learn to hunt and defend their territory and take leadership roles in their pride, just like we move through a process of cultivating courage and independence and the ability to take responsibility for our lives. Now, if you've ever watched a bunch of adorable cubs, you're going to notice just how much they play and how much they stumble and explore as they grow, right? That's just like how it is for us when we're kids. We learn by following our curiosity, by experimenting. We shape our understanding of ourselves and the world through play. And also, just like the Cubs, when we're sufficiently supported in our middle years, we're free to move from innocence to strength. We receive guidance and we learn. We awaken our inner power. We develop courage. We learn to take responsibility and we individuate and achieve increasing levels of mastery, right? As we discover our unique strengths and we come to express our essence fully and creatively. Now, Matthew, we were talking yesterday, you reminded me of The Lion King, and it's just such a beautiful archetypal story that many of you probably know about a lion cub named Simba who makes this heroic journey into his lionhood. But it's not an easy journey. which is similar to many of our journeys, right? Where whether we're cubs or kids, it's been anything but a cakewalk, right? They've been full of challenges. I can say mine has. And just like with Simba, things can go really, really wrong. There can be a lack of protection and nurturing, for example. For a cub, this could make them very vulnerable to predators and starvation, even. And we humans certainly need stability and love and care to survive, not just physically, but emotionally. And when we don't get it, we suffer in so many ways. We also need to learn essential skills like how to communicate, how to regulate our feelings, how to solve problems. And when we don't receive the guidance that we need, when we don't have positive role models who don't just give us lectures, but actually enjoy passing on their skills and show us what it looks like and feels like to be an impassioned person, we can end up struggling in our adulthood with our relationships, at work. It can be very difficult for us to become happily creative and healthfully interdependent. And then, of course, there's trauma, there's fear, right? When a cub experiences early trauma, maybe they're attacked, maybe they lose their mother or father, in the case of Simba in The Lion King, or maybe they suffer an injury. They can develop all kinds of fear-based behaviors that keep them from thriving. And we're the same. If in our childhood we experience abuse or loss or extreme stress, we can lose our inherent sense of self-worth, and our ability to be emotionally resilient and to trust in others. Maybe if we experience social rejection, bullying, like you did, Matthew, when you moved into that new school, or have difficulty forming real connections and making friends when we're moving through those years, we can experience unbearable loneliness, and it can really contribute to a low self-esteem. And it can become very hard for us to trust in others, much less ourselves. Similarly, like if we're kids and we experience health challenges, this was a big one for me when I turned 10. That was very connected to that loss of innocence I was coming into touch with when I was experiencing your attunement. Or if we have disabilities or chronic illnesses, it can make growing up extra challenging. And then if on top of those challenges, we don't get the additional support and care that we need, we can suffer even more and not have the opportunity to discover and develop all of the innate gifts that we do have. So, I mean, Simba loses his father at a young age, which impacts his entire life. So, if we grow up without the loving guidance of a strong role model, whether that's because they're not living or because they just aren't capable of giving us the guidance that we need, which could be for so many reasons. We can really struggle to develop a healthy sense of self. So we can have a hard time trusting ourselves when it comes to making decisions. We can end up acting either too impulsively or becoming paralyzed or frozen. Sometimes we don't have enough grown-ups at home to meet the needs of the kids, or when we're neglected or deprioritized or dealing with poverty, or family struggles like alcoholism, addiction, mental illness. That was a big part of my family growing up as well. We're forced to become grown-ups ourselves prematurely, and we miss out on these like really important stages of our development, especially if during our middle years we're put down or criticized or suppressed or just not given opportunities to explore our potential. We really can grow into adults who really doubt our abilities, right? And like maybe our caregivers respond negatively to our mistakes or our failures, or they're constantly disappointed in us when we turn out just to be human. Or maybe we're manipulated like Simba, to feel responsible for things that we had no control over. And we end up living our whole lives with guilt. We can have no idea how wonderful we are. And I'm thinking too, in The Lion King, it's only when Simba is able to face his past and his deep feelings of unworthiness that he's able to finally like confront his saboteur, his external saboteur, which was his uncle Scar, which of course is a mirror of our inner critic and inner saboteurs, and finally accept his true identity and claim his rightful place as king. So I know I've been talking a lot, so I'm wondering whether any of you can relate to any of the circumstances that I shared. You too, Matthew. And I just invite you to think back on those years, 8 to 14, and what conditions or experiences might have contributed to a place of wounding or underdevelopment or premature development? Was it a lack of nurturing and protection? Were there essential skills you never got? Did you live under fear or did you experience trauma? Did you have social struggles, identity confusion, isolation, illness, a physical challenge? Um, did you not get the guidance and support you needed? Were you forced to grow up too soon? Did you grow up in a way where it was difficult, if not impossible, to recognize your true gifts? So I welcome anyone to share your thoughts or insights in the comments below in your private journal. And Matthew, I'm wondering if any of what I shared, just like pluck out anything that spoke to you that you'd like to share with us. And, it could be about the challenging aspects of your growing up and how they impacted your ability to navigate relational, emotional waters, or maybe really positive aspects of your middle years, because it sounds like these were kind of good years for you in many ways, that you think really helped you become the person you are today, with the self-worth you have and the emotional intelligence you have and your ability to connect with people like me. So what comes up for you, Matthew?
Yeah, emotional intelligence is something that has developed since, since that time, because that was not a time when I had many role models around emotion. And it was, actually, I think I remember being told I was too sensitive, so that was, here I was, a boy growing up in England. I don't know if we've ever heard about the stiff upper lip English people, but, my English accent might come out again, who knows? But that time I remember the time when my grandfather died when I was 11 years old, 10 or 11 years old, and he passed away, and we went to go and pick up my dad from school, and there's no cell phones in this time, so it's like he's been busy in school all day. He's the headmaster of the school. We come to pick him up. He gets in the car, and and then my mother says tearfully to him, "I'm afraid your father's passed away." And he sat there stone faced and just said, "Drive." And in that moment, I learned, do not cry, Matthew. No crying. And I didn't cry for my grandfather until I was 27. And it was like he visited me, kind of like the way I felt your grandmother stepping in when we were doing this attunement. And I just wept. And that was kind of like my opening up to that. And I later discovered, and I've talked to my mom about this, I would say, I've never seen dad cry. Have you ever? She says, I've only ever seen your father cry once. And I said, when was that? And she said, when you were in hospital and you were unconscious. This was the change. This was the impactful time of my life as I was in hospital. And I was unconscious, and my dad literally fell onto me and wept. And that my mom said that's the only time she's ever seen him cry. And it was like, wow, it was like in that moment, I was absorbing it, even though I wasn't even conscious of it. I knew it was like my question knew there was a time, there's got to be, he's a feeling person, he's a loving person. And so that time in my life, it was, those 8 to 14 was really quite great and playful. And then at the end, it was this transition between 13 and 14. I had this accident and I was in hospital for six weeks, and it was transformative, and it changed. I didn't realize the emotional impact on me. So when I started exploring my emotional intelligence as an adult, when I started exploring emotions in a new way, I had never realized, and my parents had never realized, and a lot of people around me had never realized that trauma, though it was physical, had an impact on me emotionally on such a deep level. And so that was like, because I could never understand. I'm from a good home. My parents were good to me. Yeah, they were a little judgmental at times, and yeah, there was stuff there, but it was nothing that explained that disparity. And so that was a real opener for me around my emotional, was that my physical body was holding and storing so much of that. And so in my teenage years, 8 to 14, stoic grandmother, stoic grandfather. It was when I first started reading about my grandfather's life in concentration camps in Russia, and his storytelling was very matter of fact. There was not much emotional feeling. So there was never much of that kind of like emotional role modeling from anywhere. So it wasn't until my 20s that that started to crack open and exploring it deeper and deeper with the gene keys. So that's been, well, and before that with other ways as well. But yeah, I would say those are some of the things that opened me up in that time. And it wasn't the individuals in my life that modeled emotion. It was life gave me the experiences where it was like so painful that I had to feel. I had to numb out or I had to feel. And I chose to numb out at times.
And then you chose to feel.
And I chose to feel.
You chose to feel. I was almost weeping, Matthew, when you shared that story about your father and the first time that he really allowed himself to break through and share
Yeah.
his feelings, and it was his love for you.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
was so touched by that. Oh my God. And
And that was
oh,
another thing with my dad was that
yeah.
he never, I'd always wanted him to say the words, I love you. And he never has. He'll say the word love because he'll say, love, son, because
Oh.
that's the English way, L-U-V, love. And, but he expressed it in who he is. And
Mm.
that was when I discovered that when my mom told me that story, that really, moved me.
This makes me think about also I was thinking about what you were talking about when you had that accident, and it was the physical trauma that ultimately helped to release and heal the emotional trauma, which was like bound into the body. And I was thinking too about like ancestrally, often you know, like two generations back, maybe are the ones who experience the pure trauma. Like let's say, I also had grandparents and great grandparents in concentration camps, and then the next the next generation is often very busy just trying to create a safe container for the children and to help with assimilation and success and achievement in the material world. And it's not until that next generation that there's enough safety both in the physical environment and in the body to be able to really open up the Pandora's box of trauma and feel it, because it takes so much safety in order to feel the trauma. And so I could feel that in your own family and how we're all doing this. We're all doing it for everyone who came before us. So like everyone here, anytime you give yourself permission to cry or to weep or to get angry or to feel anything, you're doing it on behalf of your ancestors, which is it's a real, it's a main cornerstone of the gene keys. We heal forward into the future, we heal back. And so as we're contemplating these particular years, we really can be thinking about it as this is our chance to heal in a timeless way, everyone on whose shoulders we stand. So thank you so much, Matthew. That was so beautiful. And I know how much people appreciate and are inspired by you when you share so openly with us. And it's one of my favorite parts of these conversations, that I get to know you better as a person. And now, if it's okay, I'm going to go into more dreamarchy territory. And we're just taking our time here. You can watch as much as you want, but we want to give some juicy information for you. Okay. So during these ages of 8 and 14, we're not just developing in the realm of the emotions, we're growing in the creative realms. And when we're growing up in a sufficiently safe and supportive environment, we move from engaging in kind of free form fantasy play to deeper kinds of creative exploration. So it's like our symbolic and our abstract thinking expands as we start to use our imagination in more sophisticated ways through storytelling, art, music, problem solving. Play is still really important to us, but it typically becomes increasingly structured. So it's not so unusual for older kids, for example, to start engaging in role playing, world building, imaginative social games. It's a spirit of playfulness. And if it's encouraged, if our inner knowing essentially is trusted and respected, and if we're said, yes, yes, go have lots of free time in nature, time to engage in reflective activities like journaling and storytelling and poetry writing. And if we grow up in an environment that has a really healthy balance between structure and freedom, then our creativity, our trust in our intuition, our capacity for lateral thinking starts to thrive. And then we become adults who are able to problem solve using both sides of our brain, which is what the dream arc is all about. And we become adults who trust ourselves, who are less vulnerable to manipulation and peer pressure. We can think critically. We can make wise decisions. We can adapt to a variety of situations, think outside the box, see possibilities as opposed to limitations. But of course, not all of us receive that kind of encouragement, which is why so many of us struggle with solving our own problems and why we burn out from stress and overwhelm, why we get stuck in mental, emotional, and creative ruts. And this is also why the dream arc is speaking to so many people right now. And for those who really let it into their lives, and I imagine that if you're still watching this video, you are one of those people. It really can feel like the most profound medicine, because there are lots of things, of course, that can make it difficult for a child to lose their ability to play, to trust in their inner wisdom, and enjoy the fullness of their creativity. Some of us were overscheduled as kids and had to follow an endless stream of structured activities. Some of us had very little free time or play time, and it could be for a bunch of reasons. Maybe we were too busy following the rules, pleasing our parents, being peacemakers in our family, or because we were under so much pressure to achieve and be perfect and get the good grades. Some of us were busy taking care of our siblings or our parents. Or maybe we hid our light in order to avoid competition and jealousy and retribution or even abuse. Some of us were spending too much time on screens, checking out and being distracted. And as we talked about last time, for some of us, being creative and playful was directly discouraged in our home growing up. We were taught that daydreaming and engaging in fantasy were just childish and foolish, and that mistake making, like that was something to be punished, not celebrated. That asking questions and expressing curiosity, forbidden, right? So I invite you, Matthew too, and everyone listening, um, whenever you happen to be listening, to start thinking about this time of your life from the perspective of what was happening for you in relation to your intuition, creativity, and self-trust. And I'm just going to ask some questions, but remember, just trust what feels intuitively relevant to you, leave the rest, trust your gut, and share arising inner responses in the comments below if you feel inspired. And so here we go. So how easy or hard was it for you to make decisions without having to like constantly seek out external validation? How connected did you feel to a sense of purpose? How much did you feel like you belonged at home, with your family, at school, with your friends? How able were you to resist peer pressure or societal pressures and be your authentic self? Were you afraid of making mistakes? Were you often comparing yourself to others? Was your stress level very high, even though you were just a kid? So, what comes up for you as you contemplate one or more of these questions? And then I'd like you to start thinking about now, like how might you still be experiencing the aftermath of challenging experiences or aspects of these middle years? So, for example, because you might not remember very many things, but how you are right now might be giving you clues to how things actually were if you did some repressing, like a lot of us have done. So, for example, do you still really suffer from a fear of failure? Are you often stressed out or overwhelmed or burned out? Are you hard on yourself, afraid of taking risks? Do you tend to have a little bit of social anxiety or a lot of it, or have a hard time forming and maintaining deep connections with others? Do you get caught up in overcompensating behaviors like people pleasing or withdrawing completely? When you feel sad or afraid or stuck, are you able to soothe yourself? Are you able to express how you feel and reach out for support when you need it? Here's another one that I talk a lot about in the Gene Keys. Are you able to contain and metabolize your feelings in a healthy way so that when it is time to express them, you're able to do so in a really clear and constructive way? Or do you have a really hard time allowing your feelings to move through and digest and crystallize inside of you? And you end up either like blurting them out before they're ready, or like Matthew's parents, just keeping them inside without ever really letting them see the light of day. So, all right. So those are my questions. I'd love to hear from you, Matthew, if anything arose for you while I was, doing my
Mm,
thing.
doing the thing. Yeah. Yeah, definitely about listening to our intuition and our own inner authority and about mistakes, right? It was definitely, I think a lot of us in schooling as well. It's like, making mistakes came with certain grades, right? So we sort of learned it's like, oh, if I make a mistake, then I get graded down, and then there might be shame involved in that, depending on, what our inner drives are. And I was always a very driven kid as a young person, still am. And and I was thinking about that. So it's like, yeah, that creative side of me definitely started to get tucked away in that time. I enjoyed other people's creativity, but I can't say I was as creative as I used to be. As a young boy, I used to paint a lot, and then I started comparing myself to my brother, who's a really good artist to this day. In fact, that's his profession. And so, I started to forget the shadow I work with in that time of my life in the Jinkies is the shadow of forgetting. So it was almost like forgetting this part of myself that was creative and that was, and wasn't afraid to make mistakes. I remember, the mischievous, playful side of myself as well. And I remember the one occasion that seemed to really transform it all was that I was at school one day and our teacher, who happened to be my mom's best friend, so next move, not my greatest move, was that she stepped out of the room for a while. When she came back, she found me and another guy dancing on a table. And when I remembered that, it was like, wow, okay, yeah, there was, there was this other side of Matthew that maybe kind of got shut down, and especially moving into sort of an adult life in a Catholic school, that there was nuns there that were quite strict. I do not have a sense of connection of a light and easygoing nun. I haven't met those. They were always very strict for me. And there was a couple of times when I'd gone to church and confession was something you went to. And in the priest, it was more of an interrogation at some times. And there was this fear of getting it wrong. And so I still can notice to myself today when it comes to my spirituality is like this can't get it wrong kind of thing. Other areas of my life, like put me on a stage and I can goof up and do things and make a fool of myself. But there's some things when it's deeper down. So I can't say across the board that it's like, oh yeah, I'm really good at making mistakes in this area. And we do that all the time in the dream arc, that kind of thing. And then other times I can notice that pressure. And so I really know that was a time when I gave a lot of that inner authority away to, and in church, that's what they would tell you. It's like the only person who can mediate between you and Jesus or between you and God was the priest. And so all of that power is, and it wasn't until I was in my later teens that I started, I took that back for myself and rebelled against that kind of church upbringing. But yeah, definitely during that, I could notice myself not so much listening to that own inner authority and giving that away to others and feeling quite confused and feeling a lot of shame around it at times or feeling a lot of guilt of making the wrong move or doing the wrong thing. And then not knowing what I'd done wrong, but feeling I was being punished for something. So, it's like here I was saying this was a joyful time in my life, but the more you ask questions, it's like there was other parts to it. There was other corners to it as well. Yeah, that's what I'm going to share for now.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Yeah, I mean, I like that you bring up this thing, and I encourage other people too, because often we think of our childhoods and we think, yeah, our big influences are our parents, but we don't really understand the extent to which we can be influenced by our sibling relationships and that comparison that takes place. And sometimes it can be, you're put down compared to the other, or you could be locked into a box. Like, okay, we're going to try to avoid competition by you're going to be the smart one, you're going to be the artistic one. And then suddenly, like a whole part of oneself gets lost to the other sibling. So I really like that you bring that up just to stimulate people's thinking. And then the other thing, I just keep seeing you in this confession booth being so afraid you're going to get wrong coming up with things that you've done wrong. Like, I don't know, there was something about that.
Double the
That's
pressure,
just such a
yeah.
no-win situation. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. And also for people to think about what our religious upbringing was, including atheist, including agnostic. Sometimes, sometimes I like to think of my mom as a fundamentalist, anti-fundamentalist. So sometimes it's not even about what you believe, but it's the intensity with which you believe that. So you could even approach science or atheism with the intensity of someone who's very religious. And if you're a young child and you tend towards the spiritual, for example, and you grow up in an atheist household, that can be quite oppressive as well. So I just want to put that out. And then again, just thank you so much, Matthew. And I just also want to say, like, as I hear you talk, it makes me feel so grateful for the dream arc, because it really is an antidote to some of those old wounds from these childhood times that we carry. And in a way, it was literally created to help us transform our old emotional shadow patterns, our ways of defending and protecting and guarding ourselves into like buoyancy and joyfulness. And it helps us remember that innocence that I could remember losing around the time I was 10. And it helps us rebuild our emotional intelligence and enjoy our creativity and restore our self-trust. We get to do inner child work without even thinking that that's what we're doing, right? We get to play again and journal and reconnect and retrieve lost parts of ourselves through the animals, through our connection with the natural world. And we get to practice mindfulness and self-compassion, engage with creativity without expectations, without having to perform or please anybody or be graded. So whether we're like doodling or dancing or storytelling or holding a ritual or drawing a spiral in the sand or just staring out at the horizon in a daydream, right? The whole dream arc was built to help us reconnect with and retrain our intuition. And of course, it also connects us with a whole village of supportive people so that we can heal in relationship as well, with wonderful people like many of you who are watching here. And, really co-create a safe place for emotional depth and fun-loving expression and authenticity. So before I pass the baton over to you, I thought I would share a bit from the Dream Arc Codex about the lion. And for those of you who are new to the Dream Arc, the lion, lioness, they're one of 12 guardians. And for those of you who are in the gene keys, the lion is connected to the 25th gene key, and it's considered the life key of loving self-acceptance. I mean, how perfect is that for our theme? So I'm just going to read from different parts of the codex, and I'll start with what Richard wrote for the meaning of the lion. Okay. So the lion's key is really about acceptance. Unless one can accept everything about oneself and others, one can never really find one's inner power. And therefore, one can never really know love. If the lion is one of your symbols, and it is if you're on this call, then acceptance is your path. You must accept your own fears and you must go deeply into your own humanity before you can hope to find inner transcendence. This is a path requiring deep courage because whatever life throws at you, and life is throwing a lot at all of us these days, you must embrace it as an aspect of yourself. As in many of the myths connected to lions, you must sacrifice outer power in order to gain the true power, which is love. And now I'm going to read a little bit from the guidance, which is also very powerfully and deeply connected to what Richard is often speaking about these days in relation to the great change that's upon us and how on the other side of that great change, we're going to be a totally different kind of being. We're not just tossed about by turbulent emotions and dramas, right? We're not going to be victimized by our feeling life. And instead, we'll be telepathically and lovingly connected through our one beating heart. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to read a little bit more from Lion's guidance. All right. I am Lion. Long ago, in a time forgotten, Matthew, forgotten, we lions walked alongside you humans. We shared our lives and spaces. We lived as one family, as friends and equals. A deep sadness has fallen across our mother's face since then, for it was written that we all should be parted from each other for a great stretch of time. As lion, we too fell from our higher role among the creatures of Gaia. The great task of renewal was gifted to humanity until each of you has realized your true nature and healed the division within. The children of Gaia will not be reunited. It is with a heavy heart I share this secret with you now. And yet the time is coming. The great change is upon us. Your task now is to rediscover the vast love that lies in the heart of your being, in the heart of all beings. You are a vessel of this awakening. Every human has the heart of a lion. So dig deep and cast out the shadows that prevent you from claiming your birthright, your magnificence. Only you stand in your own way. You cannot blame another. Accept your wounds, yes, but then heal them and move on. Never quit from expanding into the field of light. We, your greater family, wait for you to fulfill your great task. We wait in the shadows, hoping and dreaming for the fateful day when we can return to our true role as your friend and equal. So beautiful. Thank you, Richard. So, Matthew, I'm going to hand the baton over to you, and I invite you to share anything that you resonate with, either in relation to the lions or other animals that come to mind when you contemplate this gift of self-acceptance and unconditional love. And I'd also be curious to know if there are any ways in which your relationship to animals has opened you up emotionally. You alluded to that in the attunement. In terms of unconditional love that you experience with animals, and maybe even what it's felt like to lose an animal that you loved, because I know that you've had that experience. So that's
Mhm.
it from me.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Rosie. I love all of that. And I love, you prepped me beforehand with some of the questions, but then when you're sharing and you're evoking, it's like, oh, okay, there's something else popping up. So I just really trust that when we come together. And that's this work with diving into this emotional body of work, I think, is that we're stepping into the unknown and we're allowing ourselves to move past the confines of the mind and the I know mind and entering into the not knowing in this realm of like the void. And, that's what it can feel like a lot of times with the emotional body. And, when we have interactions with people in our world and we have arguments and heated discussions and emotions can really come up. If we can remember that what we're seeing is an 8-year-old part of the other meeting us, I think that can help us deepen into compassion and acceptance, right? And so the lion that meets that acceptance of ourselves and the and acceptance of what we're meeting in the world. I think of Scar, the lion Scar, and the wounds and the comparison. You're talking about comparison. I mean, he was compared to Mufasa, right? And so there was that theme throughout his life and what led him to where ended up in life. And so, the lion and acceptance is, I think it's such a powerful piece of this whole body of work with the dream arc, with the gene keys. I think one of our key mantras within all of this is allow, accept, embrace. And that just to allow ourselves to feel our feelings, as we allow ourselves to feel our feelings without the need to analyze them all the time from the mental level, we can go through these. This is associated with the breakthroughs, right? Of the pause, pivot, merge. We pause, we allow ourselves to come into the space of being receptive to what this emotion is revealing to us and to be able to fully accept it, to not run from it, to take full accountability for it. It's easy enough to say, but it's in the heat of the moment where it's like, can I really be willing to take full accountability for how I feel? It's so easy to say, and it doesn't mean that there's not a part that the other person is playing and that we don't set boundaries and we don't. It's just recognizing that how am I responding to what inside of me do I have power to control? I don't have power to change all of the systems in this moment, in the world, but I have the power to meet the emotional reactions inside of myself and to take full accountability to that. And I feel like that's where we need to invoke rather some of the warrior. We have the whole category of warriors in the dream arc. And so often when people come to the EQ sphere in the Venus sequence, it can be so easy to be like, oh, this is getting unknown. I don't feel this. I'm not feeling this anymore. Maybe I need to go somewhere else. And maybe that'll take, and that can be the way the mind can be playing with us. And so I really feel we to honor that warrior inside of ourselves that is meeting these emotions and recognizing that emotions are not the enemy. Like they are the source of some beautiful creativity. Some of the greatest creativity we witnessed is because of people feeling and recognizing this pain inside and healing that. And not that we have to create from that alone. We can create from playfulness and joyfulness. And at the same time, it's recognizing that there is power in these emotions and that vulnerability. And we don't have to vomit it out to the world all the time. Sometimes there can be like, almost a performative side of that, but to at least recognize and honor the sacredness of the emotions moving through me at this moment, to be able to discern between what is mine and what is another's, what is mine to truly work with. There can be this tendency at times we got to feel like we got to save the world or we're doing healing for all the generations that came before. But our first responsibility is to our hearts in this moment, and that can ripple out. But it is that warrior that keeps calling us back. It reminds me of the wolf in the dream arc. The wolf is one of the warriors, and it is the one that really calls us deep into our pain. And the wolf is, there's the lone wolf that returns to, goes inwards on its own inner journey. Yes, there's times when it's become part of the pack and joining with others. But then this is about working as an inner warrior, right? So here in the wolf, it says much of this work is done alone in the silence of your heart. If you find that this work does not suit you, if it does not make you a more open and relaxed human being, then it may not be for you and should seek another path with another creature. If this is the case, do not think you have failed. There's that again. All are
Mm.
drawn to me for some reason. You will learn the lessons you need to learn at the time you need to learn it, right? But it takes that warrior spirit and that firm resolve and that sometimes withdrawing into that silence and that we can be vulnerable with ourselves. We don't have to necessarily reach out to the world straight away. Sometimes vulnerability with ourselves first, I think, is so important. And so, evoking the wolf, that might be a support to help you go into some of those. We can call on these creatures. This isn't just like always just, oh, fun and playful. Or look at what the card says or what the guidance says. It's like, really imagine that wolf beside you now. Feel that wolf. Feel the energy of the wolf. What does that energy feel like? Watch some, movement, watch some movies rather of wolves in action and just be able to feel the presence and call that in because that's the spirit. That's how Richard evoked the power of them in writing this guidance. And so I love the wolf for that. And the wolf, of course, is related to, it's kind of like the more wild version of our dogs, of our, the dogs that is man's best friend, those beings that many of us, and I think many of us here have had dogs. I actually didn't have dogs during my childhood. I have a beautiful dog now, and she's just my bestest friend. And but in my childhood, I didn't. In fact, I was scared of dogs because I think I'd been almost bitten by a dog. It was beyond my memory, but my mom says that she remembers me getting a dog nipping at me and that I became scared of dogs. And it was actually, I was out in Canada one time with my grandparents and I was out in the woods and I didn't want to go outside when the dogs were there. So somebody said, "Oh, the dogs are in." And so I went out and played, and I was just up the hill, and one of my cheeky brothers, I think, let out the dogs. And so there's these two dogs bounding towards me, and I'm like pinned up against a gate, and I'm like, but they're the friendliest, goofiest dogs you've ever met. So they helped me break through a fear. Doug was the one that implanted the fear, but Doug was also the one that helped me break through that. And I've never been scared of dogs since that time. I was about 9 or 10 when I finally had that breakthrough. And so, I think it makes me think of the dog with the wagging tail. I don't know if you've heard this, but from um, Dr. David Hawkins, who talks about the scale of consciousness of 0 to 1,000. And he says that the wagging dog of a tail is it vibrates at the scale of 500 on the scale of consciousness, which is the level of unconditional love. And so this is what many of us feel with our dogs, is that they can be this unconditional love. I take my dog out for a walk and she wants to go up and she's licking the faces of people she's never met before. And that happened with one of my neighbors recently. And I said, I don't know what, I let her do this. If you let her do this, that's fine. He said, I wish more people could be like this. You know, it's like where it's that we could have that level of trust and that we can feel because she will also growl if she doesn't if something doesn't feel safe, she will growl. But if with people, it's this unconditional love. And I feel that this is part of the intelligence of the dog. This is the spirit of the dog. When we look at the dog in the dream arc, it's related to cheerful equanimity, to equality of all beings, the equalness. And so this is just a little from the dog that you might take into your life is draw upon the spirit of the dogs of the world. We can both protect you and open you up. We live within your heart with our wagging tails and smiling faces. And when needed, we will keep negative forces at bay. We all see things and people with equanimity. Approach your family, your community, your broken friendships with an open heart. And I feel like this is, part of the intelligence of the dog and the emotional intelligence. The last two dogs that we've had, if I've been in tears or if my wife has been in tears for any reason, then these dogs will come up, they'll lick our faces, right? They'll snuggle up to us. My dog Gracie, some of you know Gracie, she is a hugger. First thing in the morning, she will come up to me and says hello, and I bend down. She puts her paws up on my shoulder, and we just hug. And I've never met any person that hugs with the amount of unconditional love that she does. And so it's like one of my favorite things in the morning. So yeah, we have this experience. And then when we lose these animals, when, perhaps when you were young, you had an animal and you had that kind of bond and you had that kind of connection. I mean, my wife jokes about it. She's like already sad for Gracie's passing when Gracie's hopefully got at least another 10 years with us, right? It's like, and I know other dog parents can feel that way too. And so, there's that they can really help us. They're a safe space for us to feel our emotions. They don't judge us. Well, I question Gracie. Sometimes it does look like she's judging me, but they don't judge us. They can hold us. And of course, the type and breed of dog makes a difference, right? It's like what's the kind of breed of dog and and who the dog was raised by, that all is a factor. And so, I love the dog for this, dogs, and then the other one, of course, is cats, right? A lot of people have had cats in their lives, and people might feel like I'm not a dog person, but maybe feel like they're a cat person, and this is another one. Dr. Hawkins talked about this. The cat's purr vibrates at a level of 500. So again, unconditional love, like the same as compassion, joy, profound inner peace. And so it's like these creatures they're around us all the time, and we've had many people. I think we're going to hear something like this from Anna's share later on today in this call, because so often we're looking for the exotic animals or the creature, and rather than trusting what's here right now. And so for me right now, it's a lot of birds. There's a lot of birds and very little four-legged creature, but our pets, they're around us all the time. And maybe you're from a family, they didn't have, I had an uncle who had pythons. He had two pythons and an iguana, what were the pets that you had? But I just want to share this from the cat very briefly, which is the cat is about resolve. It's about creating, cats are good at creating boundaries too, energetic boundaries, right? It's like if a cat doesn't want you close, the cat will swipe. The cat will let you know. It wants its own space, but you know what? It'll come to you when it's ready for unconditional love, when it wants a little love from its master. No, sorry, they are the master. When when they want it from their servants, rather. So all suffering comes to reveal that which is hidden. This is the message from Kat. Go within, go deep within my hunter spirit. Too much energy you are wasting on external matters, when the resolution you seek must first be discovered within. It's not saying that we don't do things in the world around us, but when there's that real emotional reaction to something, tending to our own heart and that emotion is really important. You are looking too much at others or to others for answers. Again, relating to that time of our lives, right? What do you really care what others think? Listen to others, yes, but then you decide what is true and what is not true. And I just, again, another powerful message from one of our allies. So if you don't have a cat, you don't have a dog, imagine one. You know, imagine one. My wife is a painter. Some of you might know this. She's a painter. And one year we didn't have a cat at the time. And so she decided to paint one. And she painted this beautiful picture of a Siamese cat. And I kid you not, it was like 1 or 2 weeks later, a stray Siamese cat came into the home and ended up living us with us for 6 months. He was very unwell, but we got to tend to him for those 6 months and became very close and was very sad on his departure. And that's the last thing I'll say about dreams too. Dreams can be very, where do your animals, where your pets show up in your dreams? Both, the last two, the dog and the cat that we've had previously had dreams. 2 days before my dog passed away, we had a visitation. I had a dream, and two cougars were stood over her. And it was just like they were watching over her. So cougars, kinds of lions, right? So these mountain lions were standing over her. And 2 days later, she was taken away from us. And my wife has had dreams about these two cougars as well. So these two cougars seem to be playing some role for us emotionally in the transition of our cats and dogs. But the biggest dream that I remember having was this dream of a great tsunami coming in and washing over us. And my wife and myself and my dog at the time, this is about 9 years ago now, myself, my wife, and my dog were okay, but the cat wasn't. The cat disappeared. It was like, where's Leo gone? He's gone in this dream. And then a couple of months later, it turned out that he had cancer and it progressed really quickly and he died very suddenly. And it was brought to light because of fires actually in our neighborhood where the smoke was really getting to his lungs. And so it became this that was my first loss of a pet because I'd never had a pet as a kid. And so that was that tsunami. It was this tsunami of grief and at first I would feel shame around it, but it was like, this pet loved me. Like there's so many pictures of him cuddling up to me and holding me. So to feel the loss of that unconditional love, it's like it's normal to feel that. And they can be a part of that opening us up. That's the gift in their passing. And as Rosie has reminded me quite often, on this dream arc journeys when there's been initiations, it's been with an animal dying, not necessarily an animal close to me, but animals and death. And so it is one of these great initiations. And so thinking of the ways in which animals play a role in that. And the last thing I just want to draw back to is this idea of the playfulness that can emerge in this as well, because so often we can remember all the traumas quite easily and the pain and those painful memories. I would also invite us, like myself, remembering me dancing on the table that time. That was like until I got caught, that was fun. Up until that moment, that was kind of fun. I think that's why later on I did that gratitude dance video to kind of like give myself permission to see that through to the end in a different way. And it's also in those moments that the truth of who we are shone through. So those moments might have been intermittent. They may not have been regular occurrences, but can you remember those moments that joyfulness poked? And maybe it was when you were playing with a pet, when you were playing with an animal, or when you were creating, or you were playing with friends in the dirt or in the jungle or wherever it might have been. And as Rosie was talking about, is also allowed today. What is your relationship to play today? Do we allow us? This is what my dog reminds. Do I allow myself to play? I have this reminder that every 2 hours she's like, "Okay, you've been working for 2 hours. It's time to play for at least the next 15 minutes, right?" And so it's that reminder of allowing ourselves to play. And I'm talking about like genuine unstructured play. They've shown how unstructured play opens us up to being very creative. Structured play, so like in sports and games like that, there's play there, but there can be the pressure of an outcome, there are pressures of expectations and that kind of thing. But just pure, unbridled, unstructured play where your wildness gets to shine through and you just you just play because that's a part of those years that we might have, we might have given our power away to in our um our later years. But this is also what happens as we fully accept and embrace those emotions, that it transmutes into this real joyful, playful soul that we truly are underneath all of these sanskaras and this wounding and everything. There's that remembrance of who we are underneath all of that. So this is the multivaried journey through this. And this is that lion message that you were saying. It's like, yes, we work with the wounds, but we also have the courage. Sometimes playing requires courage. Sometimes being a goof requires courage, to allow yourself to put yourself out there, regardless of what other people think of you. And to accept and integrate that part of you that wants to be the trickster, the laugher, the player, whatever it is. And so, yeah, this is a rich field. It's a rich period of time, whether it was painful or joyful or mixtures of both. There's richness in that for our creative expression. And as you kept pointing to, Rosie, it's like, where's that repressed part of ourselves still here, you know, acting out in the world? And what can we bring our attention to? Because I find, I don't know about you, but there's layers of it. There's layers. And so, this is, when people talk about the Venus sequence and say, "Hey, I've done the Venus sequence," I think, Tanmayo has a great one around this. You'll just chuckle. We never finished the Venus sequence. And so that's it too. When we're working with the dream arc, and just that is that continual evolution, that continual deepening expression of our emotional intelligence. And so I think that's where I'm going to bring my sharing to a close today. But that's I've been there with the dogs, the cats, the roles they played in my life, and hopefully, recognizing this in your own lived experience, and just what a beautiful gift our pets are to us, and that we can be for them as we are in service to them. They are in service to us.
So beautiful, Matthew. Oh my God. I have so many thoughts, so many inspirations that came listening to you. Just a few things I'll pull out. One was the wolf. And if anyone, I don't know, do you remember Flor de Mayo? Grandmother Flor de Mayo told a story about how she actually had been withholding her voice and didn't feel empowered to speak. And she was at this very big conference with all these very impressive people. And she literally became an embodiment of wolf energy. And that wolf got her to speak, and I think actually got her to stand up on a table and speak, right?
Yes, I think so. I remember that. Yeah.
So that story
I'm
totally
getting
came to me, and
noted.
I think it might be on one of our public offerings.
I think it is. Yeah,
So
we're
maybe
being.
we can put a little link down for people who want to hear Flor de Mayo tell that story because it was very
Yeah,
powerful,
it was very powerful. Good
very
memory.
powerful. And I just want to say, my biggest dream as a kid was to have a dog. It's all I wanted. Talked about it, all the time. But my family wasn't able to do that, and so they got me guinea pigs. And it started
Mm.
out with two guinea pigs that suddenly became 16 guinea pigs because they thought it was two females, but it wasn't. I totally fell in love with those guinea pigs. It was the first time I experienced a death. One of them died.
Mm.
And it was also like an even earlier loss of innocence because I discovered that I had horrendous allergies and to furry creatures. And it's a huge part of grieving around my childhood. I just want to say that. And then I ended up with turtles and lizards and fish and, like just trying to find other ways to connect with animals because I've always had such a deep love of animals. But I think
Mm.
what I wanted to say was I want to emphasize what you're saying about how much courage and warriorship it takes to love so deeply, um, and to play so freely. And that when you have loved someone, whether it's an animal with fur or not, or a human animal, so much that when they pass, you experience a tsunami of grief. You are one of the most blessed people on the planet.
Mm.
It's scary to love that much because the loss is so big. Um, but I have a feeling when we all end up whatever your beliefs are that happened at the end of this particular lifetime, whether you're at the pearly gates, whether you're in between lifetime and with your counsel and life review, like it is those moments that you dare to love with a full heart and to be loved. Those are the moments that you're going to remember. Those are the moments that are going to make this life a life that had been worth living. And I just want to say that. And I'm thinking we've got two more things as far as I know, or maybe three things. One is maybe there's some announcements you want to make. The other is we want to introduce Anna's video, which is going to come at the end. And the other is I have some questions that we'll be asking during the next Dream Pod call. So what do you think? How do you think we
Yeah,
should?
yeah. So yeah, I think all I would need to say is that yes, this is the transmission aspect of our calls for this month. This is our focus for this month when we meet in the Dream Pod calls. If you're somebody who doesn't have the Dream Arc course, then we hope you enjoyed this and we hope you can take this into whatever contemplations. And at the same time, we'd love for you to join us in the Dream Arc community. Those of you who have the Dream Arc course, we will be meeting on March the 19th, 2025, just in case you're watching this replay in a few years' time. And we're going to be opening up this conversation deeper in that space. We're going to be immersing ourselves in the field, in the emotional field, and the emotional intelligence of the creatures around us and the dreams that we have, how those open up our emotional intelligence and fragmented selves. And so this is how we're moving forward, doing this for this foreseeable future, so that we give you time to contemplate at least 2 weeks before you meet up and join together. And in the community calls, you'll get to go out in breakthrough rooms with other people, share your experiences, and we really encourage you to join us if you have the Dream Arc course, because it can be potent and powerful and full of lots of little synchronicity. So I think that's all I needed to say on that. So you can take it from here.
Fantastic. And of course, anything that comes up from this call or the themes, you're welcome to talk about in the Dream Pod call. But we have some central questions you might want to choose from as you're preparing yourself or just as you move along your life, either in the Venus sequence or the Dream Arc sequence or life. um, so I have them down here. Okay. Where are you your own worst enemy? Where did you struggle most when it comes to self-acceptance? Where did you tend to feel most like a victim in your life or catch yourself getting stuck in a complaining loop or a blaming loop? Can you think of a time when you were truly able to let your guard down, like Trump, and it actually led to a feeling of being met on a deeper level? Or a time when you felt free and empowered in your life? What was happening at that time? How would you describe your overall attitude that allowed that to happen? And how do you feel your childhood impacted the way that you experience, trust, and express your intuition, your creativity, and your ability to access joy and be playful? So those are our questions. And just again, always with the Dream Arc, we give lots of possibilities. It's like a giant buffet, and then you use your intuition to pluck out the thing that speaks to you. So don't worry that maybe just one little thing we talked about ignites something in you, and that's totally fine. So is it time to introduce Anna's video?
Yes.
Do you want to do it?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you everybody for joining us for this conversation. Rosie, thank you for all those questions and just everything that's evoked from there, because in the 24 hours after these calls, I know for me it's going to open up further contemplations in the next 24 hours. And that would be our wish for any of you who are watching this here, is that it just we're opening up.
Mhm.
We're poking the bear, so to speak, to see what we'll unravel. It can be quite powerful. And we've been talking a little bit about dogs and cats, and we actually want to end with a share from somebody. Anna, she's on our team. She's involved in the creative side of many parts of the Dream Arc, including the Dream Arc Oracle deck. And she's had some breakthroughs with dogs. And this was quite a heartwarming video to watch. Some of you might have seen it before, but I encourage you to watch it again and really feel how dogs played such a big part in this transformational awareness for her. So thank you, Rosie. Thank you to all of you. We're going to leave you with Anna's short video, and we'll see you in the Dream Pod calls or in the next transmission.
Right. Thank you, Matthew.
Hi, I have my DreamArc pod call update. You'll have to excuse me, I'm a bit of a nervous speaker, which maybe is perfect because that ends up being one of the threads in this story that the DreamArc pod call this morning helped to coalesce. So in the breakout room, I was with two other women, and I felt a little bit left out because they both had these beautiful stories about having meaningful encounters with animals throughout the week, and I didn't. I hadn't had a meaningful connection with an animal, and I really wanted to experience the magic. But I listened, and I really enjoyed their shares. And then when the breakout rooms were finished and we went back into the whole group, there was a woman who shared about the cat kept coming to mind, and she was feeling resistance to picking the cat because she wanted she wanted a more exciting animal, which I get. And when she said that, there's a little dog with me, and I was petting the dog, and I realized maybe actually I've been feeling the same resistance to picking a dog as well. Like, I'd thought about it, but it just felt too obvious, and I kept looking around. But I was nudged to look up dog in the animal codex, and it just resonated so deeply. And I'll read you a couple of snippets. It says, "We are a reminder of the power of family, and alongside family, forgiveness. In the great family, there are no outcasts, only misunderstandings. Your sacred task is to address the wound within your own family. Let the dog inside you sniff out the pain, then take great courage and move towards the pain. We dogs live within your heart with our wagging tails and smiling faces. Here is the essence of your sacred task. Be the first to offer the branch of reconciliation. You need not fear rejection, only you can reject your own heart." And so for a bit more context, two things have happened over the past 18 months. My family unit has experienced a series of fractures as a combination of exhaustion and courage has pushed uncomfortable things to the surface. On a happier note, during that time, my partner and we just both absolutely adore dogs so much. We've been traveling and we've looked after about 10 or 11 dogs while we were away, and we just had the best time with every single one of them. We still talk about them. Yeah, I read that paragraph and I was just struck by the resonance. After the call, I took the little dog to the dog park, and here's another thread, as I talked about earlier. A bit of a side quest I have at the moment is I'm working on my throat chakra. I often feel shy around talking, and so as part of that practice, I've been doing voice journaling rather than writing, which for me is a really big and brave thing. So on our walk after the call this morning and the puppy was running around by herself, I made a voice memo, did a voice journal about what had come up during the community call. And as in my voice note, I read the dog passage from the Animal Codex again, but this time I read it out loud. And as I read it out loud, I felt something physical inside me moved, and I started crying as I read through it and just thinking about all of the dogs that we had looked after in the special, we'd just had beautiful connections with them, and then aligning that with the challenges in my family that have been coming up in the navigating open-heartedness, change in dynamics, and all of those things. And as I'm crying thinking about all of these things, there's the dogs in the park are running around with wagging tails and sticks in their mouths, and it was just hilarious realizing how all of this had been hiding in plain sight. But yeah, I'd been hunting around for my meaningful connection to an animal, and the universe has graciously been sending me a conveyor belt of beautiful dogs throughout my life, patiently waiting for me to receive the message. And yeah, it just made me laugh how it all came together so beautifully through the community call.